Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'll give it just a couple minutes to let everyone join us, and we'll get started in just a minute or two.
Hello, Marcus. You're on mute, but it's so good to see you from Germany.
Now I'm fine. Oh, you can hear me. How are you?
Yeah, good. Not too far. We'll see you in Omaha, right?
Let's see. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Oh, John is also.
I wasn't nervous, but now all my friends and high-powered colleagues are on here. Now I'm nervous.
Okay, so it looks like we've got a good group assembled. I'll go ahead and get us started here. Hello and welcome to the next member hour in our producer series. This session is entitled Potato Production and Supply Chain Management. My name is Sarah Rodriguez and I'm the host today. ASABE member hours were started as an opportunity for our members to learn, connect, and grow. In a few minutes, we'll get things started, but just a few quick ground rules. Please do keep your audio on mute through the presentation. If you have any questions, you can either type them into the chat, or after the presentation is completed, you can turn on your microphone and ask a verbal question. This meeting will be recorded and is available for later viewing on the ASABE website and YouTube channel. Those links are all public, so you can share outside ASABE membership as well. Today, we're hearing from Keith Tinsey. Keith is ASABE Society President and Director of Operations at Black Gold Farms. Black Gold Farms is a national potato and sweet potato supplier for the consumer market and for the chip and French fry processing industry. Take it away, Keith.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Let me get to sharing the screen here. Did I do that? I don't think I did that right. Let me start this. Okay, how's that? Can we see Sarah?
Looks good.
All right, thank you. Really appreciate being here. I could go into my background, and many of you know me, but if you'd like to check me out, go to LinkedIn. But I've been involved with potatoes for a long time, since Michigan State University. And I'll taken many airplane rides and sat next to people on the airplane, and we talk about our work and what we do. And more times than not, the person next to me is so fascinated by the narrow supply chain and food production that we do with potatoes. The conversations easily last the entire trip, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And so I'd like to share some of that with you. And I'm going to start off with some of the supply chain. I don't know, it's really hard. I don't know the supply chain very well for lettuce or radishes or some of the other vegetable crops, but I know it pretty well for potatoes. And to be an innovator and to be a good engineer in this space, I think it behooves us to understand the supply chain and geography. So we'll do that. And then we'll get into some of the more technical engineering things that we're involved with at Black Gold Farms. I'll probably go fast. I have a lot to share, and hopefully we'll leave some time at the end and we can have some Q&A. So thanks for joining me. Eggs are getting expensive, so Potatoes USA, who's our marketing arm, they've put out a little push to color Easter potatoes. So I hope everyone had a great Easter, and I thought these were quite cute. A little bit more of today's story with the supply chain. I'll show you how we make potato chips, or how we serve the potato chip industry. Some of the planning that we do will go into seed, plant, grow, harvest, or washing and quality control, and then end up with a storage snapshot and talk a little bit about sustainability. Potatoes, a nutrient-dense biological product from the earth. It's very nutritious in many different forms, very flexible as a food item. And I just want to kind of relate this to you because it's why we grow so many, because it's versatility and its high value of nutrition. Potato utilization in the US. Not all potatoes are created equal. Some potatoes have specific fit for purpose. So in the frozen industry, you'll want to primarily use something like a russet Burbank, and there's different variety of russets. And so that's how you get those nice long French fries and frozen products. The fresh market would be made up of reds, yellows, some russets, the baking potatoes like in the picture on the right. But when you get to the chip sector, those are varieties that are round white. You want very clean, bright white looking potato chips with high specific gravity so that they absorb less oil. And so these are all kind of different supply chains, because most of the potatoes don't cross over very well. The dehy industry, some of the potatoes will be grown strictly for dehy, but a lot of the culls or seconds go into that market to produce flakes and flour for different sorts of other ingredients for products. And then refridge and then other. And I have an asterisk up here at the top because it lacks one important item for the potato industry, is that we use pieces of potato as the seed for the next year. So about 5% or so of the total production is actually going into producing seed for the following years. Continuing on, so if this was a supply chain, remembering that potatoes, you can't start with one potato and go all the way through to the end. So there's many parallel supply chains depending on whether you're doing table potatoes or French fry potatoes or chipping potatoes. The fresh potatoes would come off prior to processing and then go into food service. Anything that gets processed like frozen or chips, it goes straight through and into retail, then to the final consumer. The value of that is divided up with the ag and the production side getting at about 11%, and then processing adding 35%, and then most of it is at the retail and food service end of the chain. Overall value in the United States alone is over $100 trillion, with ag getting 11 billion, and then you can see the middle at 49, and then retail at 41. Creates a lot of jobs. It's almost a commodity like corn or soybeans, because it's produced prolifically, but it's perishable as a vegetable, and so it is a specialty crop in that regard. Okay, back in the day around 1900, everybody grew potatoes. It seemed like they had a patch or a piece. And, you know, we would all dig them and put them in our cellar, and that would be food for the winter and so on. And you can see where production is back then, the population of the US on the east. You had moisture in the east and the Midwest. And then because storage was a component, you see that these northern climates did better at growing potatoes than the southern climates. So what's different between now and in 1900? Oh, sorry, forgot this slide. In addition, as potatoes, we learned to grow them better, but this is just a characterization of some of the hard work back in the day. And I wanted to call out, I would have liked to have known C.H. Jefferson for Michigan State Agricultural Engineering back in 1930. I've read this paper. Many of the principles that was written in this paper still hold true today. But to move on, the thing that changed was irrigation. So it took places that were inhospitable to any kind of crop. And potatoes especially like to have lighter, sandier soils so that we can separate them easy at harvest. And so it really changed the landscape of where potatoes are grown in the US. And it took over 2/3 of the production to the Pacific Northwest. You can see Idaho and Washington totally tipped the scale to the Pacific Northwest with what they can grow. Not that potatoes aren't grown around the country, but the vast majority of them are grown in Pacific Northwest. Taking that a little further, for a supply chain, if you have most of the potatoes grown in the Pacific Northwest, how do you get it to the population shown in this density map in the east? So there's a lot of freight involved and a lot of cost. So the different geographical areas start to develop the supply chains that make sense. And in this next picture, try to share with you some differences between the Pacific Northwest and in the East. Because we'll start with potato chips. And I choose Lay's not to slight any of the other potato chip companies, but Lay's is a national brand in all states. And so when I have a couple other slides, it shows you the spread of the entire chip market. But potato chips are light and fluffy. So the freight to haul those, if you grew them in Idaho, would be extremely expensive to take them to the East Coast where all the people are. So places like Michigan have created quite an industry because they're closer to the population. And so the freight is a lot less. However, yields are less. So some of the other dynamics compared to the West Coast make it profitable to grow potato chips in the East. Another thing about the West is that this is where most of our French fries for domestic and export go. But the thing about a French fry or a frozen product, as soon as you process it and freeze it and put it in a box and palletize it, all you have to do is keep it refrigerated and you can ship it like a commodity all around the world. And in the table stock, because they get such great yields out west, they can afford to ship these really nice potatoes to the east. There's a lot of fresh potatoes grown in Wisconsin, Michigan, and in the east as well, but it costs more to produce such a nice looking potato. However, they can compete well against Idaho because of the freight differential. One thing you need to know is that potatoes are a migratory crop like many other crops. It starts out in the south where we send directly to the field or to the packing sheds. And at a certain point, as that crop moves north, Say we start in southern Florida around February, we move north. They're harvesting in central Florida maybe right now, and then we'll start harvesting at our farm in Florida in May. But there won't be another crop of potatoes coming in behind. We don't double crop. And so as you move north, the potatoes are consumed. And then at the end of October, when it freezes, all the potatoes to serve factories and tabletops are in storage. And so then all of these potatoes that are in storage up in the north above this green line then serve everything to the south. So it's kind of a cyclical, not necessarily a rubber band, but it's south to north. During the winter, we're shipping chipping potatoes out of Michigan down to the Orlando plant to serve those folks. And so this green line depicts typically where you can store potatoes in north of this line. Because of a certain step in the process, we desiccate the vines in order to get the potatoes to set a skin so that we can handle them. When you dig them fresh, when they have green vines, they have a very slippery skin and they bruise and they decay. So in this hot weather in the south, you'll literally cook or decay the potatoes before you could get them skin set and get them harvested. So that's kind of why there's this dividing line. The other thing that the north has going for it, it has natural ability for cold air cooling. As you go south, then you need mechanical refrigeration to keep the potatoes. So then you overlay all the Frito-Lay plants on top of that, and you can see that the plant locations are close to the population centers, and we haul the potatoes to the population, and the distribution, because they're so light, is nearby the consumer. So you can see all the black gold farm locations, and then you overlay the French fry plants, and many of them are up here in the Pacific Northwest, one in Maine, Wisconsin, North Dakota, and then up in Canada. These are the French fry producing areas. And then we also grow sweet potatoes, and sweet potato storage is done a lot in North Carolina. My good friend, Dr. Mike Boyette, did a lot of work on that. And then we have a symbiotic relationship with a Lamb Weston plant in Louisiana, where we ship to the consumer for table sweet potatoes, as well as make sweet potato fries down here. Continuing on, here's a video. It might be a little choppy based upon your bandwidth, but this is the inside look of a potato chip factory. It goes pretty quick. So you see the round white potatoes with these are a heavy set storage skin. If you're looking at fresh potatoes, they would look white and slippery looking. So being conveyed through, being washed, you can tell they were a lot cleaner right there. They were peeled. I think this is the peeler, sorry. Coming out of the peeler, and now they'll go to a slice. If they're too big, they get cut in half. Because all of the potatoes, the chips have to fit into the automated bag fillers that they have. This is a slicer, a centrifugal slicer. This next little, you see how those slices come off? That's how chips are made. That's the steam coming off the fire. So they have to rinse the starch off the potato chips so they don't stick together in the fryer. And so the fryer, these are just exiting, is maybe 80 feet long and maybe about 4 feet wide. Then the last step will be filling the bags with an automatic dump and weigh system, or weigh and dump system. So just a little flip there. I hope you were able to see a little bit of an inside of the potato chip plant. And so there endeth my little talk on the supply chain through to the end product. Now we'll take you to the farm and talk about the things that we work on to grow the potatoes and some of the engineering that we're doing. Typical crop, you need sunlight, adequate water, fertilizer, and then we'll get nice healthy plants through photosynthesis. For potatoes, we're creating in the plant sucrose, fructose, and glucose, and then based upon the day-night differential between sunlight and no sun at night, that all gets packed down through the roots into the tubers, where the tubers are typically around 80% water, 20% dry matter, and the dry matter is mostly starch. We couldn't do what we do without our folks. So we inserted this slide before we get into more of the technical stuff. We have agronomists, we have machine operators from all walks of life. We have quite a bit of a varied staff from age and experience, a lot of institutional knowledge growing a specialty crop. And we try to pass that down, but if someone leaves that's been there for a long time, then that experience needs to be made up. And so you can see me on the right-hand side, always got my recruiting hat on, always looking to grow our folks and grow our business. Do a tremendous amount of planning, and this is part of the institutional knowledge transfer, as well as training on material that we know or trying to do better. Since we grow one crop per year, there's an off season, and it's a pretty intense time to refuel, regenerate, and figure out how to grow a better crop the following year. I like the little illustration here at the bottom. This is actually the timeline from a seed piece all the way through when potatoes are ready to harvest. It takes about 120 days. Part of one of the things that really threw us off, and it's still reverberating from the pandemic, like many things, is that our seed starts in a greenhouse from a tissue culture in the test tube. And we do that to get as close to disease-free as we can. And then we multiply the seed 4 years. And so our seed supply started 4 years ago. And so if you can imagine during the pandemic when people were eating at home, using a different kind of potato at home than what the industry had produced, because they thought they were going to eat them at a restaurant or at McDonald's or something like that. All the different varieties, it's been turned upside down because we don't plant potatoes from seeds. We use a potato seed piece, and to develop the 100-weight that we need to plant, we start that 4 years ago. And that industry is an industry unto its own with a specialized set of seed growers. And you can see we're visiting with some of them. And their task is not to grow them for fit for purpose for food, but it's to grow us the best seed that they can so that we can optimize results at the farm. And this seed comes from all over, mainly the northern farms, because it's a storage crop. And to store it well, to get a good skin, and then that translates into good potato stands. A little more into the process. It's a pretty intense statistical process that we're trying to do, because we get the biological variability from all different sorts of sizes of seed. If the seed grower had a bad stand or produced very large tubers because the potatoes had more room to grow, it makes it really hard for us to plant because our mechanical planters would prefer one particular seed piece size. So we're very intense. This blue machine is a seed cutter up here on the left, and there's a lot of adjustments. So we are adjusting that all the time to hit a sweet spot so that we can be as precise when we're planting. And so that sweet spot is between 1.5 and 2.5 ounce seed potatoes. This is where the planters will operate most effectively. And we'd like to do more precision planting. It's difficult because the sensors and the way seed bounces around, and we would love to see some innovation to help us plant seed properly. And right now, the best thing that we can do is to get the proper size seed from the seed growers and then cut it into this sweet spot. But you can see we have some small pieces and we have some very large pieces. So you can imagine these very large ones, it's difficult to set up a planter mechanically to plant that and that effectively. What happens, you'll get doubles, what we call doubles and skips. So if we set it to shake off the double, that shake may also shake off the single. And so it's a very intense project, and I'll show you why it matters in a second. This is part of the precision that we try to achieve when we're planting. We literally get out behind the planters and dig 10 feet in each row. And we do this multiple times a day. And because the seed growers only grow a certain amount of seed for the entire industry, and we have to pay for that too. So if we use too much because we've cut it improperly, we've cut it too big, that's a big deal. And we actually might run ourselves out of seed, which isn't good. So we try not to be wasteful, and we try to be as perfect as we can. Then after planting, we go through a hilling process. Ahead of emergence, we'll side dress maybe some more fertilizer. We need the good hill structure because the potatoes tend to kind of grow up out of the ground a little bit or close to the surface. We need them to be higher than the water table, or else the seed piece or the potatoes themselves may decay if we get a heavy rain. And then the little paddles on the back are called dikers. They create little dikes or dams down the row. And when you have a topography that has rolling hills, we try to minimize the water just running straight down the rows into the low ground. So we try to retain the water and also retain the nutrients, and to maintain consistency so we don't have variability across the field. Potatoes are grown in hills mainly for it's a drainage thing. We're on 34-inch row spacings typically. Some folks are on 38, but 34 is kind of a standard in the industry. There is a thing called bed planting, where it's kind of like a 6-foot wide hill, but only in places with tremendous sandy drainage soils is that possible, like beach sand and things like that. Here's another look at the growth stage. You can see at 14 days. So in Michigan right now, toward the end of the month, we should see sprouts like this. In 30 or 28 days, they'll be just coming out of the ground. 40 days. So look at the difference between 40 and 60 days. So in 40 days, they grew about a foot and they closed rows. This 28 to 60 days is the most critical time in plant development for us, to make sure we're watering and taking care of that crop during that period. And then you can see at 110 days, this is the result. I don't know if you can see this very well, but this little thing here, this clump, is actually the remnants of the seed piece that was planted to generate the plant. Sometimes they don't decay, they hang on, kind of like a skeleton. There's not much left in them. And then it's pretty intense monitoring. Production costs in Michigan and other areas we're around $5,000 per acre. So there's quite an investment in the potato crop. That's probably, is that 5x what corn and soybeans might be. I like to say potato plants are fairly wimpy. That's probably not fair. There's just lots of little organisms that like to knock them back, including the Colorado potato beetle, early blight, late blight, which was the Irish potato famine. And so we're out there a lot to make sure weeds and all of those things are taken care of. And then we're also digging up and checking the tuber, how many stems we have, how many tubers we have, and then the yield. And a lot of the stuff what we do during the summer is learning so that perhaps we change our practices during the winter time as we go into the next season. Everybody's seen all sorts of different sorts of digital monitoring. We're working with CropWise from Syngenta for digital scouting. Tremendous efforts to hook in imagery, to share information across all of our locations and all of our people, because what one location is tackling, another location is probably tackling it as well. And with the family-owned, it's family-owned, but we're bigger, and so we have a bit of a corporate structure, so we have to be able to share information and also share information with our customers that are interested in knowing that we're doing best practices in growing potatoes in the most sustainable and proper way. Talked about plant stand and bed planting. So this is a picture of a bed planted field in Florida. You can see the tramways or the tractor tramways, but this is about a 6-foot wide bed. It's a big deal in agriculture for many reasons, economically sustainable. If you don't have a plant in every hole, so to speak, you're not optimizing what you could be. You're losing yield, the quality. These plants have more space to grow, so then the potatoes get larger and quality may degrade. And what all the processing companies or even the grocery stores are looking for particular size ranges. For processing, it makes things easier to process. If everything was the size of a baseball, they could plan, they could design their equipment to not have to accommodate huge potatoes or things like that. So we are driving a huge focus on trying to get 100% plant stand, because everything else comes from that stand. And where you can really see it is in all the precision work in the corn and soybeans. You look at the side of a corn field, and all those plants look like a picket fence. They all came up at the same time. They're all sharing nutrients and not crowding each other out. It's pretty amazing. So that's what we're trying to do with potatoes. Moisture, irrigation, 95% of our fields are center pivot irrigated. And that's to maintain quality and consistency and mitigate the risk from a drought. And potatoes need quite a bit of water and to grow and to get the yields that we need. But we can also overwater them and get the vines wet. And then once we lose a vine, we lose that engine to drive that photosynthesis and the sugars down into the tuber. So we're extremely intense on checking our fields, and then also employing all of the irrigation engineering that's come about over the years is in addition to using moisture sensors and rain gauges and more distributed information. So as we handle many acres with few people, they have the information at their fingertips. They know if a pivot has stopped or broken down. They can go take care of it when they need to, instead of coming to the field the next day and saying, oh, wow, the pivot stopped and I just drowned 10 acres of potatoes because the water didn't shut off and I didn't know it. So there's a lot of automation and a lot of the iron center pivot is this old technology. At some point, when that old technology wears out or rusts out, it'll get replaced by newer, more state-of-the-art pivots and so on. We do a lot of spoon feeding of nutrients to the potato plant through the growing season. If we put it all up front on our sandy soils that we choose to grow potatoes on, we can get a leaching rain, and then we've lost a lot of the nutrients, especially the nitrogen. And so we're tracking, and we want to put on the right amount when the potato needs it, not too much, not too little. And we do that by taking petiole samples every Monday and getting the results. And over time, with experience and institutional memory, people will get to understand the varieties and how they use the different nutrients and know what happens after a big rain. So a lot of this is to like check the box off that we're doing the right things, and also to like I said, learn for the future. And so it's become very data intense. And we use that data and that experience and that knowledge from everything that we're learning to make our daily decisions on pest management, fertility, training our new people. We're in the process of hiring an agricultural and biological engineer to just work on the data that we collect. We collect so much data. Some of it isn't terribly meaningful and maybe it could be better. But if you collect all this data, you have all this automation, what can we do to apply it to make a difference? You know, the low-hanging fruit in production is probably picked. And so we're going after those things that are harder and harder to sorry, just checking my time, to figure out. Harvest. This is a storage harvest, and I'll show you a video of a fresh crop harvest in a second, but you can see how we've desiccated the vines to get a skin set in those rows. And right now, that harvester is picking up 4 rows, or digging 4 rows, but it's picking up 12. And that unit on the right-hand side is a windrower, or some people call it a side caster. And so we're just trying to be more efficient with our machinery. And then those potato trucks, they'll have a fold down side because bruise and decay for quality as well as food waste is really important. So we try to minimize the drops and gently handle the potatoes. And that truck on the left will get filled within a minute or two, and then the next one and the next one is right behind it. So it's a very fast-paced, logistical, hit the window when the weather is right and go and make sure we have enough capacity to finish before the weather sets in. Let me play this video for you. It's fairly self-explanatory. This is our Sturgis, Michigan location. It's an example of potato planting. You can see it was a cornfield. One thing I did not mention is we do not plant potatoes after potatoes. It's kind of a sustainability thing. The soil needs a chance to rest because the disease organisms that like to attack potatoes, they build up, and we have to try and get those settled back down before it grows second crop. So those are fresh potatoes being dug green, and they'll go directly to the factory. And I'll show you in a minute how they get washed. So we don't necessarily dig or pick potatoes. We actually harvest the soil and sift the soil out. And what's left are the potatoes and the vines. And the vines are carried and blown out the back. So you notice we use that red machine in the middle. It's called the crop cart to help us keep going when we don't have any trucks ready to load. So this is at the wash plant, the receiving station. And this is going into a wash system. So the first stage is rock removal. The rocks will fall to the bottom and the potatoes will flow on with the current. And also the vines and the things that float will be skimmed off the top. It goes through a vision system that will knock out foreign material as well as any greening. And then the graders will be, in this case, final inspection. I'll show you in a minute. We've started to employ cameras to look for foreign material. Those nice white potatoes are getting loaded into that semi. That's the way all potatoes make it to market. Is not all of it. 95% go on a truck to the factory, and if those were going to a close plant, it would be same day, and they would be made into potato chips the next day. If you're going to Orlando, it's about 2.5 days to get down there. So those potatoes have to maintain their quality even on a long lane, like going from Michigan to Orlando. Let's see, to advance this. There we go. We talked about grading a little bit, and I wanted to get to our camera system. One thing, this machine in the middle, if the pulp temps are too warm on the potatoes will start to decay in the trucks because the bacteria are just ready to eat them. So if we can cool the potatoes down below 70, and then if we could have refrigerated trucks, that would be even better. But that center section is a high energy cooling tower to cool potatoes 5 to 10 degrees before they get put on the road. So this is one of the things that's real new to us, and that is helping. We have people that literally shoot buckets of golf balls out their backyard into the fields, as well as bones and walnuts. You wouldn't think walnut would be a big deal, but nut allergies. If this stuff gets into the food stream at the plant, we get an unfriendly call, and then it gets very expensive because they have to throw product away. So we're trying to use AI camera system to detect anything that we've missed. And so far we've had pretty good success. The issue that we've had is in the modeling. We have to model all of this foreign material to teach the system what it needs to look for. And with potatoes being highly variable, if they're grown in black soil, they'll be a little black. If they're in sandy soils, they'll be more white. And so it's a difficult thing, but it's coming more and more. And it actually works. And in a lot of cases, it works very well. A quick snapshot of our QC process. We try to predict what the potato chips are going to look like before they get to the factory. This is what it looks like in the back of a truck. Make sure that it's all clean. Product can make it to the plant, and we have a steady supply. It's my son Seth on the right in a potato storage. I'm rushing because I'm running out of time, but I want to show you what really got me started in the potato industry was in storage. So this is our Winnemac, Indiana site. We've got 3 storages with room for 2 more to build. And so at first it starts with vine kill in early September to be able to set the skin that I talked about earlier. And this is what the storage looks like. So the dotted line is the 18-foot level. And so we store potatoes at 18 feet deep. And the floor is an air floor. So it's got forced air ventilation blowing up inside of it. A lot of this is been done with many people over the years that have perfected potato storage and ventilation. And ASABE has 2 or 3 standards that help us to do that. And here's a potato storage flyby. So state-of-the-art potato storage. There's 4 storage bins in this building. 1, 2, 3, 4. This fan house contains the refrigeration and the cooling and the fans and the humidity to maintain the potatoes. And then those fan houses supply the air to those bins. In a second, we'll fly in. And so we'll fly through this door. This is the control room, and then the doors on the left are all the HVAC systems. And then through the door on the right, all of that conditioned air gets blown down to this plenum. And those pipes or those holes feed the potatoes on the right. So on the right, there's an 18-foot deep pile of potatoes, and that air goes under the floor in the potatoes. And now we're inside the bin. Those 4 bins are 60 feet wide each, and ours are 168 feet long with a conditioned cavity, so the ceiling doesn't sweat and condensate water on top of the potatoes. We do that with some heat and a fan instead of more insulation. And we're almost through. And this is just the center of the bin to show you the separation between all the other work alleys. I'm going to cut it short because I want to get to be able to answer questions. Just to talk a little bit about sustainability. We rest the soil every 3 years to have a better crop. We've been doing things, farmers have been doing many things for many years to be sustainable. But we're being more intentional in keeping track of those things. And Black Gold wants to make sure we're doing our part to lead and set example for others. So we've said we consider an acre to be impacted with regenerative practices if at least 2 of the following are applied. So not every climate and every potato field or every farm is able to do all 4 of these things on every field. And so we do what we can to reduce carbon emissions, build soil health, improve watershed health, and enhance the biodiversity. And we hope to have all of our acres 100% impacted by 2030. Right now, we're on a journey, and this year we're at 63%. And again, it's all the people that make it happen. We can't do engineering without the people driving it, right? So that's it. I think I went really fast, but maybe we've left some time for some chat.
Thanks, Keith. We do have a few questions. I'll go ahead and start from the top. These first couple of questions were regarding the, I believe it was the Frito-Lay video. Is the slicer a centrifugal mandolin?
Yeah, you could call it that. So the slicer head is round and it rotates, and there's about 6 or 8 mandolin blades. They're like a 5-inch razor, and they change those blades out every hour. If they don't change them out every hour, they get a ragged cut. If you have a ragged cut, then you're ripping cells. And what that does to a potato chip is it absorbs more oil. And so they can actually test the oil content of the potato chip. And as it gets worse and worse and worse, they can see the oil consumption is increasing, and it's time to change their blades.
And then a follow-up question. What mechanism peels so little off the outside of the potato?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It doesn't take much when the potatoes are fresh from the field. There's rotary drums or centrifugal drums, and they're either 2 things. They're kind kind of a stiff bristle brush, or an abrasive material, kind of like a grinding wheel. It's a fine line. If you grind too much off, you're throwing good potato flesh away. If you don't take enough of the peel off, some of that peel flakes off in the frying process and goes into the bag, and it's an undesirable consumer item.
Are all potatoes irrigated? And is there an evolution happening in how potatoes are irrigated, flood, sprinkler, drip, etc.?
Yeah, more and more of the potatoes, because of the input costs, are irrigated because of the risk of not having a crop if there's a drought. So there are still what we call dry land potatoes being produced, but it's heading toward more and more non-irrigated potatoes. And the second part of that was, oh, is there an evolution? Yeah, well, one thing, like in sweet potatoes, there's a lot of flood irrigation, furrow irrigation. And I've seen this in Nebraska and other places that I think flood irrigation is not water efficient, or is not as efficient as sprinklers. So you start to see the preferred method would be like a center pivot sprinkler irrigation for automation and lack of labor, or less labor.
Next, how has mechanization of potato growing, processing, and storage impact desired potato characteristics like skin thickness, water to starch ratio, etc.?
The mechanization, most of that is in the breeding. So the potato chip potatoes are bred to have a thinner skin, which makes them harder to store. So part of the mechanization might be such that we need to have more robust storage systems for chipping potatoes. And the other thing is, it's a really good point on mechanization. The chip growers are much more, I don't want to slight my Russet Burbank colleagues, but chip potatoes, because they have such a thin skin, they're very prone to rot, and bruising will start a decay. And so you find the chip growers are much better at handling potatoes. They handle them gentler because they have to. They won't have good quality, or they'll lose their crop in storage to decay. So that's some of how mechanization is matters in potatoes.
Does Black Gold have their own seed stock farms?
We do not. We would like to. Part of controlling our own destiny, maybe in a vertically integrated chain. But we work very, very closely in symbiotic relationship almost with many key growers that serve us.
More of a fun one. What's your favorite way to eat potato?
My favorite way, I would have to say, I have to go to chips. You know, if you ever get a chance to go to a potato chip factory and you can eat fresh made chips right off the line, oh my gosh, they are very tasty.
I've got a different line of questioning. How are French fries cut?
Good question. So there's they pump them through some blades. So they put the potatoes into a water stream and they shoot them through a series of crosscut blades in a pipe, literally, and they come in as a potato and they come shooting out as French fries.
Because you cannot grow potatoes on the same ground every year, do you rent the land from other farmers?
Yeah, thanks, David, for that question, because I went quickly and I forget some of the things I want to say. Yeah, so to grow the amount of potatoes that we grow, we have to be on 3x or 3 times the amount of acres that we're on this year. And so we can't own all that ground. It's and most potato growers don't. And so you develop land partner relationships with the neighbors to make sure you got that growing base.
And does driving trucks on the soil cause soil damage or compaction? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point because it does. We if it's too wet when we dig in one field, we move to another field. We're spread out quite a lot. We try to find the sandiest soils, and if we want to rent ground from that farmer in the future or that landowner, we need to take care of that soil. If we impact it and compact it, and they're not able to grow their crops like they will the next year, that system is not sustainable. And so some years with the rains, we have to get the crop off. It's a little more difficult. So we use things like crop carts and so on instead of driving the trucks in the field, because the crop carts have more flotation.
So what are potatoes typically rotated with in non-potato years?
Corn is a big one. Cotton, depending on the region. Wheat, soybeans. It's not rotated with tomatoes. Tomatoes and potatoes are from the same family. They carry the same things, same diseases that will affect potatoes. Harbor for tomatoes too. So there's some things you don't want to follow, but in general, corn, soybeans, whatever, typical Midwestern crops.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the preferred method for desiccating vines?
There's we use a spray. So we take a ground rig with a 120-foot boom, and we go across the fields. And it's a desiccant. It's a chemical, but it's one that is labeled so that it doesn't translocate into the tuber. It just kills the vines.
What fertilizers are commonly needed to grow potatoes?
Potatoes, all the same as other crops, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. The phosphorus piece is a difficult one for potatoes. Their root structure are often very poor, and actually we're trying to breed for that. So for a root to uptake phosphorus, the root has to intercept the phosphorus, because phosphorus clings to the soil and doesn't move through the soil like nitrogen does. So we can kind of move nitrogen around, but potatoes need a healthy dose of phosphorus. And so root development and placing phosphorus in the right place for the potatoes to uptake it is extremely important.
Do the number of eyes on seed potatoes factor in?
Yeah, it really does. So what we're trying to do is get as many stems per seed piece as possible. And then from the number of stems, then we get the number of trunk vines. And so sometimes eyes will produce more than one stem. If we get seed that comes big, then there's kind of a finite number of eyes, and we might have a blank piece of seed that doesn't have an eye. So at least one eye we need in each seed piece.
I've reached the end of the questions that have been submitted. If we have any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like, or you can type it into the chat.
Well, if not, the hour's nearly up. I want to thank everyone for coming. I see a lot of friendly faces that I haven't seen in a long time. I see you, Barry Smith. I'm sure you're up in Canada somewhere, and yeah, I love the smiles and a lot of friends, and I hope to see a lot of you in Omaha at the annual meeting here in July. And I thank you, Sarah, for putting these on. It's a lot of fun to watch how the different producers produce our food. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. And I hope you'd all thank me or join me in thanking Keith for this wonderful presentation. It's fascinating to learn what our members are doing and, products we consume every day. I will give a little plug for our next upcoming member hour. Alicia Modenbach is presenting Advancing Circular Bioeconomy Systems. And this will kick off a CBS themed series of member hour presentations. All the details are available at asabe.org/events. Some of those details are still being ironed out, so keep an eye on your email and check our calendar for upcoming member hours. And thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.